evening, Chef, and thanks for coming again with Chef Thomas. So enjoy your evening.
Well, again, thank you. And as far as some of the stuff that we're going to be showing you tonight, we couldn't show you everything, but we tried to pick things that kind of made sense. The recipes that you guys have there are very detailed. They're not precise, and we do that for. This is kind of. I mean, at the restaurant, we do a lot of things that. We do have exact recipes for certain things, but we always are changing it. So we'll always be subbing out this for that. Every week, Diane texts me on Monday with what she has, and it's not always going to be the same thing that she had the previous week that we already have on the menu or 2 weeks before, and the same goes with all the other farms. And our fishermen, they'll text us as the boat's coming in, hey, we're going to be having this, and that coming in, and it's like, okay, well, let's figure something out, and so that was kind of like the whole mentality that I kind of want you guys to have when you're looking through these recipes, is that things can change, and it's more of like a guideline. So I don't want you to be afraid when you see, oh, it's 50 grams of coriander and 10 grams of cumin for the satara seasoning. You get an idea. Just think like, okay, well, it gets coriander, cumin, and just, for you guys doing it at home, I think it's perfectly fine this is a guideline. You can make it taste good using this as guidance. And again, like if you don't have something specifically, we sub things all the time with recipes, because it's not exact. We don't look at it as like, oh, we're changing the recipe or we're doing this. It's more of like, okay, well, this is a different product. What have we done with something that's similar, and how can we make that great? And then we'll start there, and then sometimes we'll kind of just go in different places with it, depending on what it is. So, but the main thing is that, for us at Driftwood at least, is that we are making the most out of local products. That's really what we strive to do, and especially it gets more difficult in the summertime when there's it's really hard to grow this time of year, or what's coming up to the summer. So what we have that is kind of like it's a finger food type thing. The first course that we're doing tonight is called. It's a dolma. A dolma is a very general term. I believe it means stuffed. But what I remember in general, like eating around different places, I remember a dolma being a grape leaf stuffed with rice. Usually vegetarian. I usually recall it being like the vegan option at a lot of restaurants and stuff like that. It's definitely not. There's a lot of different cultures like throughout. Definitely it's in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East. So this dolma, this came from exactly what I was explaining, whereas collard greens is one of those things that we get a lot of. A lot of our farms that we work with get them. It's something that you definitely see in the hotter months when you don't see a lot of other things. So it's usually, we try to get really creative with things that we have a lot of, and what can we do with it? So this is a perfect example of that. So what we basically did is we made our version of a dolma. Rather than the grape leaf that would be wrapped in, that would be stuffed with something, we took the collard green leaves. And it did take a little bit of trial and error, because collard greens are tougher than grape leaves, so it takes about 3 to 4 hours to cook them and all that. But I think we can probably start. Should we probably start? I wanted to show you guys how we can basically fill them. It is very easy. This could be a 2-ingredient dish if you wanted it to. At the restaurant, since we've been messing around with it for the last few weeks, or less, I guess about 2 months. At the restaurant, we use pork jowl. So we take raw pork jowls, we'll cure them, smoke them, and render them out, and we use that as a base for the rice, and then caramelize some onions with that. So you can kind of fill it with pretty much anything you want, and that's why the recipe on this one is very vague. People do seafood in them, people do meat, people keep them vegan, vegetarian, really whatever you like. But for me, this just kind of screams Southern flavors. It's your very basic, your very obvious Southern flavors. So it's the collard greens. There's black-eyed peas in there. We cook the rice with some onions, and And then, Diane's black-eyed peas. Again, like those are one of those things that in the summertime, those are two products that you see a lot of because they hold up to the heat in this hot weather. So, I just want to I'll show you guys what I have. So in the recipe, it says large collard green leaves. That's really just so that it's big enough to actually completely wrap your filling. What I have here are collard greens that are already cooked in basically like a very aggressively seasoned water. So this is mimicking a brine grape leaf that you would normally have a dolma, that would normally be wrapped around your dolma. So it has, I do vinegar, a lot of salt, like saltier than you would actually want to enjoy it. Bitter, collard greens are bitter naturally, so what that does is that really kind of cuts through it. It cuts through the bitterness, and it brings a little bit of freshness to it as well. So collard greens here, they have this big stem. Normally when you're cleaning collard greens, if you were going to braise them or stew them or put them in a soup or something like that, you would usually remove all of that rib right there because that does definitely take a lot longer to cook than the actual leaf itself. But for this purpose, since we do need to leave it as an entire leaf, in order to wrap it around, I like to cook them and then remove the rib afterwards. It's a little bit more tedious, but otherwise, in the cooking process, these two sides will very easily separate, and then you're going to have to piece it together in order to roll it. This is something you could do with Swiss chard. If you had like bigger leaves, you could do. I'm trying to think of other greens. I mean, if you had any sort of, I guess you could probably do it with like almost like a wilted romaine, a wilted bigger leaf lettuce would probably work as well. So basically just going to cut out, just a small knife. Before we did cook these, we did just trim up. There's a little bit of, the stem goes pretty much, usually like 3 or 4 inches, depending on wherever the farmer cuts it. But we do trim it up like that, just for space purposes before we do cook it. So just cutting out that leaf. That allows you, not that this is perfectly good to eat at this stage, but the problem is that you can't really roll it because it wants to fling back, so you can't really wrap it around there nicely. But what we did with these was we actually took all these, we chopped them up, and we mixed those back into the filling, so you still get all of those. You get a little bit more texture from the stem than you would if it was just the leaf. And then I'm going to show you. I like to use gloves just out of nature of working in restaurants, and it's a little cleaner for this step. For the filling, like I was saying, I take rice. I like to overcook the rice a little bit. I very much encourage leftovers. Like this is like a very good leftover or usage of leftovers. It can be. I mean, my wife's Puerto Rican. There's often leftover rice and beans of some sorts in my fridge. So that's something that you could really use any sort of flavor profiles you want. We like to use a little bit of Cajun seasoning. We make like a house-made Cajun seasoning at the restaurant. So we like to cook the rice in that. Like I said, we use some pork jowl that we have. We kind of have that as like a staple, like you would have bacon in your fridge at home if you're a meat eater. We have smoked pork bacon, smoked jowl bacon. So that's what we like to use for a lot of things. But this is very easy to be a vegan option, and we get a lot of vegans at the restaurant, so we always like to, if it can be really good and vegan, I like to just keep it at that. So basically the rice, once you have your filling, that's what this is it's rice, the black-eyed peas that were cooked separately, some of the chopped up stems from the collard greens, and then seasoned however you like. If you like it a little spicy, you can put any sort of spice in there. Like I said, we use that house-made Cajun seasoning. And essentially, you just want to lay it on your leaf. That might be a little bit much. But again, all these scraps, you can throw this into, if you're making a soup or you're making anything, it's really delicious. And then anyone who's made a burrito or a chicken Caesar wrap or anything like that, essentially, it has that split in the middle, so we're just kind of keeping it pieced together and then folding over the edges. And there it is. And there's a very easy handheld. You could I think it's a really fun. You can also, if you want to do something like this, like at a cocktail party, you could also probably cut it in like a few smaller one-bite pieces, almost like a little vegan veggie roll type thing. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that's more of like a very general thing that I feel like has a lot of different uses, and feel free to do whatever, leftovers. We don't throw anything out at Driftwood. That's a big thing. So like we always try to make the most out of everything that we have. So I think this is a very good example, or a very easy way to do that. So I think as far as how are they? that's the important thing. If it doesn't taste good, then it doesn't matter. Is it okay? Okay.
Those stems, you could quick pickle those too.
The collards?
The stems that you took off, did you pick them?
The thing is, these specific ones took about like 4 hours, I think, to cook. So you
The stem part, only the stem part.
Oh, the stem, yeah. I mean, for this if you were to, so what we would do for that, what you're talking about, if you were to do something different with the actual greens, removing the stems before you're cooking them, then yes. But in this case, we're actually cooking it. We're cooking it, the whole leaf with the stem on it.
Can you
Yes.
can you freeze the colored greens after cooking them?
I'm sure you could. Again, like I didn't test this for any sort of bacteria or anything, how long it will actually last. But I feel pretty confident that the leaves would last a minimum of a month, refrigerated. The filling, I think if it was something that you did want to have like in the freezer, I think that would definitely be fine frozen. You might want to just kind of mix it up. Sometimes you get, I'll definitely have it in like a tightly sealed container so you don't get any like frost on it or anything like that. But yeah, crock pot would be perfect. That would be a perfect thing for this.
Put it on low, let it cook. All day.
That's essentially what we are like when we do this. We did hotel pans that are about this high, this big, and we just put as many leaves as we can. And we pour that liquid that we seasoned, brought it up to a boil, let them wilt, and then we actually put something to weigh them down, like a wire rack that just keeps them submerged. So they're basically, it's doing the same thing that a crock pot. Yeah, it's essentially a slow cooker because we're putting it in a low oven. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Without the fermentation. Yeah.
No.
We actually on that note, that's another thing that we are working on is the collard green kimchi at the restaurant. So that is more like the sauerkraut idea. We're just trying to figure out how to preserve, because like I said, we kind of get like a dry spell for local products, throughout the next few months it's going to start. So anything we can do, like we've definitely done different types of fermentation with things, candied things, any way to preserve it throughout the summer. That's what we try to do. So we still have those like cool, fun local products to work with.
I'm Tommy Coombs, as you've heard past couple of people say. Jimmy's Chef de Cuisine at Driftwood. Our next course that we're doing is something we've done a few variations on, and it's pretty easy to do with Diane's produce. We do za'atar roasted mixed root vegetables. The recipe we gave you guys is the preserved lemon tahini emulsion. Today we're doing a whipped feta for you. So you can do a few different things, whatever you like. The preserved lemon tahini was like our vegan option, but the whipped feta is just a little something different that we like to do. We do this, like I said, we'll do depending on whatever Diane gives us. We switch it up. So this week we were able to get some kohlrabi, pink, the queen turnips, pink queen turnips, red lady turnips. You know what they are, John. Kai carrots. Radishes, we got the watermelon radishes, and kale chips, no zucchini. We're doing all root vegetables. So, and then we're going to do a little bit of whipped feta on the plate. This is our seasoned roasted turnips and root vegetables. It is za'atar. It has a little bit of our house za'atar, has a little bit of black lime. It typically has cumin, coriander, sumac. We do switch out the sumac for the black lime, so it has a little bit of acidity. We do kind of a dry roast on it. So we did set aside. I'll be presenting for you guys the mixed vegetables. So we do have the watermelon radishes, different colored carrots, pink lady turnips, kohlrabi, which has been peeled. Just cut to similar sizes so they kind of cook consistently. So we have our house za'atar. I did leave out sesame. Sesame does not get ground. We like to leave that whole. I'm doing some kale chips. The kale, we have the dinosaur kale, curly kale, Siberian kale. And yeah, she gives us a nice mix. So we're going to take some of the kale in the bowl. I'm getting the pan going for the vegetables. Like I said, we do a pretty dry roast on it. Too much oil, and the za'atar won't really stick that well. So let's give it a light oil. I'll add a little more in the pan as needed. A little bit of salt. Some za'atar. We go pretty heavy on the za'atar. I started with a pinch, but I don't know what I'm thinking. All right. While the pan's heating up, I'm gonna get it just in the right spot. You want it like a medium high to start. If you really want to develop some color, you can finish the vegetables in the oven. For the kale chips, we're just gonna grab our kale. We're gonna hit it with a little bit of olive oil. We do another version of these with a little bit of pecorino. We're just gonna do salt today because we already have the feta on this dish. But for some dishes, we really do enjoy the pecorino. It dries up, adds a little bit of its own kind of salt, little funk. So a little bit of salt. You're gonna lose a lot of moisture when you dehydrate this. These, you basically put them in a, really easy to do at home. You can do in a really low oven. We did these ones overnight in our ovens off with just the pilot heat. So, super simple. Spread it out. It can overlap. That's fine. It'll all dehydrate. If you have a dehydrator, that works great too. So just as so. Oil, a little bit of salt. Right in the oven. So here's your finished product. It's kind of cool. They get a little translucent, crispy. Very simple, very easy, and very delicious. So our pan is definitely pretty hot right now. I'm gonna add a little more oil to start. Let's turn it up. Let's get a little bit of smoke. A little more za'atar. A little bit. So the oil, since we're only using a little bit of oil, you're going to get more of a darker char. It's going to look not such a consistent brown sear. That's fine. I did say it was Middle Eastern, right? Is it tar? Yeah. Feta. All right. Black lime. It's basically like fermented and dehydrated limes. Pretty common in the Middle East. You can find it at certain like in the ethnic aisle possibly, or you probably have to go to a specialty store for it. Definitely on Amazon. Find anything on Amazon. All right, so you'll see the za'atar is just kind of coating the vegetables, getting a little bit of color. Oh yeah, there it is. I see it. And like I said, you can do a few different. You can do like, it's really versatile. Whatever vegetables you'd like to do. If you do go zucchini, somebody said zucchini, squash earlier. I would just not cook it with root vegetables. Cook it separately. You can do it with different calabasas, pumpkins. Basically, whatever's in season is what we do with it. Just adjust your technique a little bit. We ferment a lot of things. Oh yeah, we get a lot of peppers. Actually, great. Thank you for reminding me. We have our own driftwood hot sauce that we made with peppers from Diane. So we do ferment these in-house. We do lacto fermentation, so just a little bit of salt. We put them in bags and vacuum seal them. You don't necessarily have to. You can put them in just a Tupperware. We do 3%. So you just clean out the seeds to your desired spice. I mean, it depends on the pepper. These were super spicy. Right? These were the really hot ones?
Pretty hot.
Yeah. But so yeah, it just depends how hot you want it. And you'll be, like, add them in your food processor. You can do a blender, whatever, and just get them chopped up with the salt. And then leave them out at room temp for about a week. And they'll start to develop and ferment. And that you blend it with a little bit of hot sauce. A little bit of vinegar. A little bit of vinegar. We add a splash of honey for balance. You'll need a little bit of, just make it taste how you like it. But we do have that to offer as well if you guys would like to try tonight. Now you can, at this point, you can really just not do that. Once you have your desired color, you can finish them off in the oven. You guys ready for the next dish? Awesome. Glad you enjoyed it. Beautiful. All right, so this next one is actually currently on the menu at Driftwood right now. We do typically it's swordfish. I mean, as Jimmy was saying earlier, we use even from our farms to even our seafood is very local. And basically whatever we can get, we can get. So the swordfish actually switches to amberjack or cobia, other like meaty type fish, like swordfish. We do this with we cook it to about a medium. We serve it with a smoked tomato puree, grilled kai beans, and a roasted red pepper tapenade. The inspiration from this dish was actually, I was hanging around at home one day, and I had a bunch of tomatoes left over. I wanted to make like a tomato sauce soup, kind of for a grilled cheese, and turns out I made something that I thought would be great with fish. So I eventually made it on the menu. So for the puree, I don't know how many of you have a smoker at home, but simply roasted tomatoes works really well for this. It does have a small twist. We do, I do a garlic rosemary sofrito for this. So I actually use crushed or sliced garlic. You're gonna grab a little bit of olive oil. You start from cold. You're gonna add your sliced garlic, your rosemary, so I'll show you guys these tomatoes real quick. We're already up on this. We just want to get it, we want to bring this garlic to like a golden brown. So once you do get it up to temp, you want to lower it and just cook the moisture out till it gets a little bit crispy, but not too dark because then it'll get bitter. A little more olive oil. Just enough olive oil to cover your rosemary and garlic. And then all of this is going to end up in the puree eventually. So these tomatoes, I'll show you guys real quick. I split them in half. I use fresh Roma tomatoes. I split them in half. I roast the skin side till completely black in the salamander, or the broiler at home. And then I throw them in the smoker. I get them pretty dehydrated. But if you just oven roast them at around like 400 degrees, 425, you just want to lose some of the moisture and develop some caramelization. It's kind of a deeper puree. And then it really reminded me of like Southern Italian, you know? So that's what prompted the roasted red pepper tapenade. Tapenade traditionally is it's an olive-based condiment, usually spread on bread, or I thought it would go great with this puree. And Diane's beans. which the beans, we just give a quick blanch in salted water. And if you're at home, I mean, you don't necessarily need to do that at home for like one saute a pan of beans, but you do want to get like a good amount of heat and just get a little caramelization on those beans as well. So now we're simmering here. Like I said, we just want to cook some of this moisture out. We can slow it down just a little bit. And in this cup, I do add a little bit of champagne vinegar, salt, and honey. Just a little bit to balance it out. And you can use a little bit of agave if you have on hand, or whatever sweetener you like. We like honey, sometimes agave. Do move it. Do move your garlic, rosemary, sofrito every so often. It will caramelize on the edges a little more than the center. And at the restaurant, we actually serve the kale chips from the last dish. We serve on this dish. But we figured it was more suitable for the vegetable dish today. Yeah, well, actually, you do use a good amount of this oil. You don't need to necessarily use all of it, but the oil does, well, at this point, it's flavored oil. It tastes like, you know, toasted garlic, rosemary. But then it also helps smooth out your puree a little bit. And, you know, olive oil is a little bit fruity. So I have my blistered smoked tomatoes. Those will go in the blender. My vinegar, honey, and salt. A little bit of salt at the bottom. It's a little stir. And yeah, it's a pretty versatile puree. Like I said, I initially dipped a grilled cheese in it. And you will notice in this process, once the bubbles start to dissipate, that means the moisture is leaving, and you are then getting crispy stuff. Well, you would, like I said, you generally just want to dehydrate it. So you can go really low, like 200 degrees. I mean, it depends how fast you need it. If you have a last-minute dinner party, you could definitely get it done within a couple hours, like even an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, just depending on the heat. If you have a little more time, then you can go maybe 250. 250 would be good, probably. 250 for an hour or two. Yeah, just a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt. Remember, as you lose the moisture, it is going to concentrate. So maybe I would taste it. And then if it feels like it could use a little more salt, don't add any more. And that'll be perfect. I found out the hard way. Especially back when we used to add pecorino into it, which was great. It was great, but I hope you like salt. And we do it on racks if you do have like a rack for your tray, but it is not necessary. I would just start with the feta drained, and that was like a Bulgarian feta, as she did point out. So it's pretty sharp. It is sharp, but it's a little creamier. It is a sheep's milk cheese, and yeah, it's a little more sour than salty, rather than the traditional Greek feta. And honestly, sometimes you get a batch that's really sour. But it's pretty good. And yeah, the olive oil will help balance it out just a little bit, mellow it out. And it'll smooth it out. And then it might look a little bit loose in the blender, but it definitely sets up. So don't go crazy with trying to thin it out too much. We're almost there on this garlic. We're starting to caramelize around the edges. Like I said, just a nice golden brown. And it will be crispy. It will be slightly crispy. No, but you're just looking for the developed flavor, of like that toasted garlic. I honestly, I never did that before. I did it at home. I was like, let me get a little like toasted garlic and rosemary flavor in there, like make the soup in the blender basically, and I was pretty happy with the outcome. One thing, it does turn pretty quick. Once you start to see it, do keep a close eye on it. We're getting kind of crispy, and it will carry over a little, so take it off just a moment early. We're there. So if you guys could see, the bubbles are pretty little, pretty small. And we are getting a little crispy. And you can kind of hear it. I don't know, can you? Can you hear it if I get closer? But yes, all right, I'm just gonna add this mixture to the blender. Like I said, you can do all the oil to none of the oil. It's up to you. I would recommend a little bit of it. It will help smooth your puree out just a little bit. I'm gonna go a lot of it. And then you can always add a little more if you need. But it is pretty strong at this point. So I don't know how many of you actually have a Vitamix at home. It works great for all kinds of purees. You do want to start it kind of low and then work your way up. Also, don't put the spatula too deep into the blender. I've done that a couple times. You can adjust for seasoning. You can go a little more honey. Depending on how sweet your tomatoes are, you can go a little more honey, a little more salt. And you were asking me my favorite fish. I was thinking about that a little bit as I was blending. It really depends on like what you want to do with it. For this particular set, we always lean toward the meatier fish like sword, cobia, amberjack, and like cooked to a medium because it is it's pretty strong flavor profile dish. The tomatoes, basically a lot of developed flavor. You have the tomatoes which have been roasted, the garlic which has been fried. For those of you that aren't familiar, amberjack is we sell it a lot at the restaurant. It's not super. I don't know how to say this. It's not super commercially sold, not super popular in Florida, but it is a really good fish. It's almost like a. Is anybody familiar with hamachi? Hamachi at like, I know you are, little lady in the middle. Yeah, yellowtail. It's like a really big yellowtail. But yeah, in Florida, it does not have the best reputation. It is really good, very oily. A little bit about the tapenade. I think I kind of lost track of, I was talking about it. And so like I was saying, it's a traditional like olive-based condiment. It also has capers, roasted red peppers. We do roast ours. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar. For the roasted red peppers, you can really just put it over an open flame and let it turn black and wipe the skin off with a little napkin. And we do add some like orange zest, lemon zest, oregano. That kind of ties it all together.
Saying that it's very rare that both Tommy and I have the opportunity to be at anything like this, just because one of us has to always be at the restaurant. So we're really, we've been planning this out for a long time, and we knew Diane mentioned that this sort of thing was on a Monday with the restaurant closed. So we're having a great time. It's really, we're really enjoying being here. So the dessert course. Usually for these sorts of things, I try to get creative and try to just push myself to do something different. This was something that I actually opted out of that, and I decided to go with something that is very meaningful to me and to Driftwood. Anyone that has been to Driftwood has probably had this dessert, but it is a dessert that we opened up with. And it was actually, I'm not a pastry chef by any means, and I've definitely come up with a few desserts, usually because I've had to, because either I didn't have a pastry chef doing that or I had an idea about something. But this was something that I have people that come into the restaurant. There's this one lady, I think she's like 85, 90. she's closer to 90 now, and she comes in and she tells us that this dessert reminds her of her grandfather, like stuff that her and we have numerous people that come in and they have some sort of like emotional connection. And that's, for me, that's like one of the biggest compliments. Like we have certain things on the menu. Obviously the food needs to taste good, but for me to be able to, for somebody to be able to come into the restaurant, have something to eat where it affects them emotionally, like I feel like that's like the ultimate challenge. That's for me, like that's what I try to do. So we always try to have some sort of a twist or a play on something that's familiar. Obviously, like people like, not everyone, different people that come into different restaurants they go for different reasons. Some people go because they want something new and different. Some people go because they want something that they know that they're going to get what they expect and something that's familiar. So a lot of the things that we do at Driftwood is kind of blending those two things, something that is familiar enough to where they read it on the menu and they're excited to order it, but to where it's different enough to where there's a surprise when they do actually get it. And of course, the most important thing is that it tastes good. So this is one of those things that people were like, what, cornbread for dessert? That's weird. And I get it. I've never had cornbread for dessert. But it was just one of those things that like for years I've had this really good cornbread recipe that I've done for different things. And I just kind of on a whim, it was probably because I was trying to get my dessert menu sorted out when the restaurant was opening and I had a million other things going on. So yeah, we decided to do it for dessert. So what I wanted we have the recipe in here, and there's not very many people that get this recipe. But again, like I have a lot of people that come, when we usually, I have people come into the restaurant. I've given the recipe out to people at the restaurant probably 3 or 4 times. Of course, I keep it very vague. And it's always like in grams, and maybe I'll leave something out or something like that. I mean, you need to give people a reason to come back, and if so. But still, like, I'm not one of those chefs that's like, oh, this is my recipe, like, ask any of these guys here, like anyone that starts working at Driftwood, they have access to every single recipe we've ever created. It takes a lot more than a recipe to be able to do what we do. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without the people that we have. And a recipe is just one of those things that makes it easier for us to do it because we can quickly refer back to it. Again, we do everything in grams. You can, if I don't know, I'm not a home cook at all, but I know, like from what I know of home cooks, it's like measuring cups and teaspoons and stuff like that. You can pick up a cheap scale, less than $20 probably find you a scale. We like that, especially at the restaurant, but in general, you have one thing to measure everything with. So the proper way to measure liquids would be with a measuring cup, fluid measurement. We do everything by weight because you have one scale, put that in tar, and it just makes it very easy and streamlined. And it's just one thing that you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about cleaning out all your quarter teaspoon, your half teaspoon, you know what I mean? But what I wanted to, I was just gonna demo here. So we have the cornbread. Just by the way, everything that we did here, as you all were coming in, we were just finishing up, but there's a really awesome wood-fired plancha that Kai Kai Farm built out there. So whenever we get a chance to work with wood fires, we always do. We have a smoker at Driftwood, but we don't, just because of the practicality of like a restaurant, being able to like control the heat and all that wood, you don't have that consistent sort of heat source, so it takes a lot of work maintaining the wood fire. You need enough space, enough ventilation and all that. So we always take advantage of that. Except the dolmas. The dolmas, those were not used on the plancha, obviously. But going backwards, we started with the cornbread that was browned in some butter on the plancha with that wood fire, giving it that little hint of wood. The beans, the swordfish, all the roasted vegetables, those were all done on there. And we didn't want to do we wanted to do on there for the flavor, but still, again, so that you guys aren't here waiting for us to, and we're out of sight, we're you know, probably messing things up because under pressure, I don't want to have a mic, you know. This isn't what I do every day. I mean, I am having a great time, but you know, we're not used to people watching us. So,
We're tasting what you do.
so we have the recipe for the cornbread. It's a very easy recipe. It's basically I explained it in there, but it's really you just have your dry ingredients, your wet ingredients. You can take a whisk them together. You bake it off. It's really easy. You can cook it. Some people like it really undercooked, where it's like a little fudgy in the middle. I love it that way. Some people like it a little bit drier. For this application, when we do it at the restaurant, we do a large pan. So it's kind of hard to do it to where each portion is going to be, you know, each portion is going to kind of, we just do like a nice even, perfectly cooked is how I call it, rather than like, you know, a little bit undercooked, a little bit overcooked. It's more of like I call it a perfectly cooked cornbread. And then we cut it. And what I think really makes this dish is what I'm going to show you all, which is just browning it in butter. I know that sounds pretty basic. The pan's a little hot. That's okay. So I'm just going to basically melting the butter. You definitely want to start in a hotter pan for this. If your butter's not hot enough, what's going to happen is it's just going to soak right into the cornbread. Butter-soaked cornbread is not a bad thing. But you're not gonna be able to get that caramelization, and you're not gonna be able to toast it up, which gives you that texture, which I really love about this. And I don't have a nonstick pan, which I was hoping to have, but so once that butter gets a little bit brown like that, you see those bubbles. You can do this on a griddle. We did it on the big plancha. We were doing like 20 at a time. The key thing is just not to let it stick. And you know, grilled cheese. Think grilled cheese as far as like the color and the texture that you're looking for. And then just making sure it's warm through. That's pretty much, you know, when you can get that nice crunchy outside and it's soft in the middle. That's really what we're looking for, like little crispy edges. And sometimes, depending on how, I'm not used to cooking on these things, so this is one of those things, just like a grilled cheese, where if your bread's toasted before the cheese is melted, you might have to pop it in the oven. Same idea, you know. So for this, right now we're looking for the color. Sorry, I'm using my hands. I probably shouldn't be doing that, but. So this is just one of those things. I know this isn't like very exciting. This is something most of you have probably done this. I'm doing this because this is just one of those things that I feel like takes it from just a piece of cornbread to, wow, that's really good. And so I actually just shut that off after I turned it. It's already starting to get a little bit of color on the outside. These are already at room temperature, so just the heat is probably going to warm that through. What we did those on the plancha. We popped them in the oven, and so we just have to go get the ice cream, and then we're going to be finishing it off. About this dessert, again, it's served with buttermilk ice cream. I don't know. I didn't really think this through very much. It just sounded good to me. But I have heard that apparently Johnny Cash's favorite thing was cornbread crumbs dunked in buttermilk. I've heard, like I said, there was quite a few people that the flavor pairings between the blueberries, the buttermilk, and the cornbread were just something that just something. It obviously, it worked, but it's not something that I ever knew about, or it just made sense for me. I mean, I'm from South Florida. I grew up in this area, and I'm not, which is not the South, as we all know. But I do have a lot of family. My whole dad's side of the family is in Jacksonville, and I guess my connection, like when you look at Driftwood's menu, maybe not nowadays, but at least at the beginning, it was like a crazy mix of Southern, Italian, not Southern Italian, but like Southern, like, you know, your typical, like the dolmas, for instance, like those types of flavors, the cornbread. And then I have a lot of Italian experience in cooking. I was classically French trained. So you definitely see like it was like a kind of a weird mix of things. And actually recently I've kind of discovered or realized with the attraction I have to like Southern cooking. Obviously it's comforting. You know, it just has like those comforting flavors. And it's also for me personally something like I was very close to with visiting family in Jacksonville. I used to spend about 3 months a year up there when I was really young. And but never really having a thorough understanding of it. You know, like there's not really like a restaurant, like as a, you know, trying to, you know, learning how to cook, becoming a chef. At least at that time, probably about 15 years ago, 10 years or 20 years ago, I can't really think of a Southern restaurant that you could actually go learn how to become a really good chef using these ingredients. And you know what I mean? Just now there's definitely plenty of chefs that are doing that. But at the time, I had to choose, okay, I want to become the best chef. And unfortunately, you were restricted to mostly French training, you know, or you know, Japanese or Italian. Those were really kind of like your three cuisines that had people doing it at a very high level. So that was where. So I guess with the Southern thing for me, it's like I'm constantly trying to find those things that can kind of use really good technique and just do it very well, but still incorporating those sorts of flavor profiles that I really love, and I kind of just naturally find myself attracted to. So that's where you kind of, I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit. Some people definitely look at the menu. People that know me really well, they can look at Driftwood's menu. Well, before Tommy got as involved as he is now. But for the first few years at least, you could look at the menu and it was like, oh, well, you know, if anyone that knows exactly where I was, exactly what I've done, like some of my closest friends, they could be like, oh, well, that menu is exactly, that makes perfect sense for you. Which I don't like that. I don't like that one-sidedness of a menu. I don't, you know, I like diversity. I like things to be balanced. If I was eating at Driftwood, if it was only me and I was, you know, if I was the only one, great, you know, but that's not the case. You know, we definitely like to have, you know, something for everybody, but also just keep the core quality and the values, and then keep things changing. And of course, like I said, supporting whatever we can do to support locally is very important to us. But it's definitely fun for us to continue. Every year, like every farming season, we always come across the same or similar ingredients. And so we always kind of push ourselves to do something a little bit different, a little bit more creative. Or maybe we just, you know, even when it's off season, we're still thinking about, okay, well, that would be a cool thing. When we get that, we're going to do that. You know, like I mentioned, like the collard green kimchi. That must have been like 2:30 in the morning one night when we was like, oh, we have a lot of collards. What are we gonna do with those? And we were, and it was yeah, like we were both like, okay, like we can't just sell sides of braised collards. Like, can we put them on a dish? We didn't really have like a, you know. And for me, it's like I've never really preserved collards before, so it was like just that sort of thinking. That's what we all love. That's why we do what we do, you know. And like I said, that's really why Driftwood that's what we wanted Driftwood to be. Was not me, not you, not my wife, not Tommy, not one specific person, but really just, you know, if it's going to be the best it can be, it needs to be everybody. It needs to be, and everybody needs to be. Josh is here. He's on his day off right now. Well, we all are, but we really appreciate you all coming out. Hopefully this the cornbread, you guys are all happy with it. One last thing, the bee pollen. I don't have the bag, but so this was just. It just made sense. Again, I don't really know why we added this to the dessert, but this is a cool local product. Technically, we're stealing bees' food, when you buy this. But I just thought it brought like it really like kind of rounded things out. We do use a good amount of honey in the cornbread and in the blueberries themselves. The bee pollen we get from McCoy's honey. They're in Loxahatchee. We also get our honey from them as well. But it's just like a cool, unique product. It's very, very healthy for you. So that's what's kind of sprinkled on top of the cornbread. Oh. Any questions? All right, folks. Well, I think this is probably it. You guys have been great. Nobody threw anything at me or Tom. Like, nobody sent anything back. We're really hoping to be able to do this again next year. And in the meantime, we're really happy that Diane has been able to provide this, this venue to be able to have this sort of thing.
And again, thanks again, you two. You did unbelievable job. Everybody, I was picking up the plates, and everybody was saying how good that fish and what you did with the kale and everything. So they said this is a meal that they will remember. And reason why they come, again, I repeat this many times, it's not that complicated to get all these top chefs in here. They do a fantastic job, and we have a great relationship. But as well as they work so hard to use the local farmers around them to produce what they do with the best flavor they can do without adding all these chemicals that you see sometimes around. And the point is because they want to show their customer base. They come here, they want to really show their customer base that they are affiliated with a farmer. Because very often I go to places, I see my name on menus, and they never bought anything from us at all. And that's a fact. So the ones that will change the menu constantly, put maybe a special of the week, Kai Kai, he puts the name on his menu. You know it's a fact that he buys from us. But a lot of times, they just pretend. The page is 5-page, 6-page long, and they say they buy from Kai Kai. They don't even know what Kai Kai is. So that's one of the reasons they come here, and appreciate the time they take on their day off, because they work how many hours you can imagine, to come and be with us. Thank you again.